Are we live?
We're recording now.
We're live. All right. So apparently, Manitoba has changed some of our restrictions in regards to isolation requirements, and also in regards to gathering. I think it came to effect. What was it, 28th, I believe, and then also changed. I think today as well. So, what do you guys think about this?
Well, actually, I've been waiting for the isolation thing for a while because I think it's been my personal belief from what I've read that a lot of people hold on to this infection for a small amount of time, and the 14 days of isolation originally, and then believe it was just 10 up until today, which is now what, 5 or 7.
I believe it's down to 5.
So, anyways, a lot of healthy individuals with good immune response are overcoming this virus quite quickly, and it's creating a staff shortage to sit around and wait for 10 days while you're sitting at home basically not working. And, well, that's a good thing. This 5 days. What exactly have they switched to in the isolation, though, besides the 5 to 7 days? Adam, do you know?
They've gone to 5 days from 10 days. And essentially it seems to be that there's evidence now pointing to the fact that the incubation period is shorter. People develop symptoms faster, and generally they don't get as sick. Definitely there's more testing and results coming out to prove all of this, but it does seem like the whole illness is just a shorter course from start to finish.
Right, and a couple days ago, I guess, they also restricted us in terms of our group gatherings. So if anybody is actually going out, which some people are, but I mean, like, what is this? Just churches, schools, and I guess restaurants. For those people going into restaurants, you have a shorter, lesser capacity, right?
Yeah, it seems like they put down to about, what was it, 50%? I think it was.
Well, I mean, that's both good and bad, as we've discovered over this. But really, how many people are following these restrictions? I guess, obviously, if you're a business, you're following these restrictions. But if you're the average Manitoban, what are you doing? Are you actually listening to the news? I'd be curious to know what people are doing. But really, you're not paying attention to the group gatherings, are you? Or are you just basically living your life at this point now?
Well, yeah, it's hard to say. And I mean, we should note, the isolation appears to still be 10 days for those who are not vaccinated, starting the day of their test, as per, this article here on CTV News. But yeah, it's a good point that you bring up. I mean, how many people are following these gathering rules, and how many people are having trouble following them because it doesn't seem particularly clear on exactly what they are, and they do change quite often, it seems, on a whim.
That's true. Well, in any business, they're following the restrictions, but you and me, we're discovering that the Omicron, from what we've read, is now the prevalent strain of this virus, and we can't really scientifically say how lethal it is, but there's a lot of suggestive evidence to suggest it isn't as deadly, although it's highly contagious. What are people saying about that?
Yeah, it does seem to. There does seem to be real world evidence now coming to light in several countries around the world, in especially South Africa, where it
And
was
even the
first
UK.
detected, and the UK, and there was something out of Japan as well. I don't remember exactly the numbers on that, but it definitely looks to be that it transfers much faster between people, but it's just not creating the severity of illness as was potentially seen with previous variants, which does lead to some questions about, are these restrictions at this point, are they really doing anything? I mean, we're already seeing record numbers in Canada across, I think, most, if not all, of the provinces. Definitely here in Manitoba, we are seeing quite a bit higher numbers than we have in daily case rates. Um, and one really starts to ask, is it helping to continually
Yeah,
report
Michael,
these high numbers?
pull up the numbers of what's today's current infections on in Manitoba, case rates and that. But yeah, you're not wrong. I mean, Omicron is prevalent now, and regardless of the restrictions, it seems like spread is going to be occurring. So, is this something that Manitobans are going to be worried about? Should be worried about? Or is it something like it's inevitable and we'll just take whatever precautions we feel like?
Yeah, well, I think we're gonna worry about it. I mean, it's hard not to worry about an illness that is killing people, but it does seem to be that it's a fairly low risk to most people. Uh, Even if you get sick, you're not going to get particularly sick, and then you'll likely come out of that with some sort of immunity. I mean, this is what we've been told, but it becomes difficult to really try to understand exactly the data. If one was to take, for example, their own news feed, everyone's got their phone. You're getting articles thrown at you left, right, and center, and they've all got some different viewpoint on the severity, the transmissibility, and it's really hard for one person to figure out just how dangerous this is to them and just exactly what they should be doing to protect themselves from it. There's just so much data, and a lot of it seems to conflict with the other data. So, it makes it pretty tough to figure out what you should be doing.
Well, these new isolation procedures, that's probably one positive thing to look forward to, seeing as we might be looking at hopefully a light at the end of the tunnel kind of situation where we're realizing that even though the transmission is going to be probably quite incredible, we at least have a province where we have taken some action to reduce the strain that these restrictions were having on the system. I mean, wasn't it just when was it? Was it this week that I know several stores have had to close because of staffing, and restaurants as well. But isn't there? I know even in healthcare, there's a lot of facilities that are struggling to get their employees because they're basically sitting at home because they've tested positive or been somewhat in
Close contact.
If there's even symptomatic in any way, they have to isolate for a bit and go for testing, hope that it's not COVID. What was it? Wasn't there a couple of healthcare facilities up north?
Yeah, the hospital in Gillam, I know for one, has been shut down temporarily because of staffing shortages. And there's another one up north too. I'm not certain exactly where, but when you're talking about these locations up north and you just have a hospital that can't open, well, one hospital in an area like that is serving like hundreds of kilometers radius of people. It's a pretty major impact to just have to shut one of those down. And now people have to go 200-300 kilometers more if they need healthcare for any reason. So I mean, it's definitely a problem that needs to be addressed.
That is a common problem, I think, with just the size of this country and the population density. Obviously, here in the city, you're gonna have more infection, obviously, just because of the amount of people here. But you also have the benefit of having a dense population that has the infrastructure to provide money and systems in place to take care of this situation we're in. What are we to think for these areas where obviously they're isolated in northern Manitoba or some rural part of Manitoba? They basically know that they either have to stay home or they get infected and hope that they are okay or can get medical help. I mean, what are these restrictions doing in terms of being that far out? Like, are I guess gathering numbers in large areas like that, people are taking it more seriously.
Yeah, well, I think the idea behind the restrictions is that people gathering are causing the spread. But I mean,
These here are some of the capacity limits you guys are talking about. Just kind of showing exactly what they are saying in regards to how many you can have and exactly which businesses are affected by it.
yeah, okay. So we got new capacity limits. All right, let's see what we have here. The additional, okay. Restrictions mean gatherings must not exceed 50% of the usual capacity of the space or 250 people, whichever is less. And this is including indoor and outdoor public gatherings, restaurants, licensed premises, food courts and socials, movie theaters and concert halls, performing arts venues, and outdoor ticketed performance arts events, museums and art galleries, outdoor and indoor sporting and recreational facilities, including dance schools and martial arts studios, gyms, fitness centers, and yoga studios, indoor and outdoor ticketed sporting events, indoor recreational businesses, seasonal facilities and events, religious services and indigenous cultural events, and bingos, casinos, and businesses with VLTs. That is a very comprehensive list. And I'm not, like, what does that leave at this point?
Well, basically what we're saying is, as this Omicron starts to spread, they're just going to restrict us from doing whatever kind of life we have. And we've noticed that in the NHL and other entertainment forms like that. Basically, they are closing off to, if not playing in general, they're actually closing off to audiences. Isn't that what's happening in the NHL?
Yes, I believe the Jets are, their games are postponed. I don't know exactly how many, but they won't be having any fans present until at least January 11th.
Yeah, they were saying the 11th for that one. And I think some of the other provinces, it was, I think, 1,000 fans were allowed in the building, I understand. So that doesn't leave very much if you
That's
think about
not
it.
very many, 1,000 fans.
No.
Yeah, and when you look at what they're doing here again, it's like, it's deja vu. This is the fourth wave now here, and it's just the exact same precautions and
Slow the spread.
Yeah.
but is it at this point? Like, Omicron is a different story, and they've acted very late. So at this point, are they really slowing any spread?
Is it even possible? That's a question to ask. Just because we don't go out to these events doesn't mean that we aren't hanging out with our families at home and living with families or having to go to work and as much as you mask up. I mean, you're still living with other people and transmission is going to occur. And if it's highly infectious, you can only take the precautions and can't really worry that much past that. I mean, Michael Lee had pulled up here the active cases, which is incrementally higher since it was before. But I mean, we have a population that's how much vaccinated?
Is 80 something percent?
I believe so, yeah. Unfortunately, they only have it as numbers, and I can't quite tell.
Regardless, these numbers are extremely high.
Yeah.
And this virus is going to pass through because how effective is these vaccines right now against Omicron? I've tried to actually look that up. I've seen some evidence that says it's about 70% efficient. Have you guys been able to actually read into that?
As long as you had the booster, I believe it was about 90% effective. And then if you were just at the first two doses, it was, yeah, about 70 to 75%. What I've seen.
Effectivity against what exactly, right? I mean, there's different factors at play. There's infection,
Yes.
and then there's hospitalization and
Yes.
whatnot. So,
Excuse me.
and it's really, it seems pretty difficult to get definitive answers on this stuff.
I think there was more geared towards the symptoms. Like basically saying that, yes, you can still catch this, but you may not experience all the effects that, they talked about in the very beginning. So, for instance, the headaches or the I can't think of the word at the moment.
All the symptoms.
All the symptoms, pretty much, but you're going to get milder cases essentially because of the fact
That is
you
the fact.
were
That is the fact
vaccinated
of
against all
being
this.
having some kind of immune response.
Yes.
Natural infection or vaccinated. You're going to respond to a secondary infection or your first infection after vaccine with much milder symptoms, likely due to the fact that you do have either some kind of T cell response or antibodies in place. With that said, I mean, Manitoba death rate 3 times the national average. What do we know about that?
Yeah, that's not a really pleasant stat when you first just read that headline. Now the
Deep
info
dive.
the info provided here is talking, I believe, about a specific time frame, which is a week, or at least this first part is where it's talking about. Over the past week, Manitoba sported Canada's highest COVID death rate, 1.2 deaths per 100,000 people for the 7-day period ending December 30th. And that turns out to be 3 times the national average, which is 0.4 COVID deaths per 100,000 residents. But I mean, that's a period of 1 week. That's not a large. It's not necessarily indicative of the full, pandemic or even a particular wave at this point. But it does raise an interesting question: is why is it so much higher in Manitoba? We're not the only province experiencing an Omicron surge at this point. So why is it hitting us harder?
Particular article compares us to Quebec, and when we go back in history to the initial wave of COVID, we flattened the curve immensely to the point where it doesn't even basically appear on a graph. So if you remember back in that time, Quebec and Ontario were having huge numbers of infections. So scientifically, that shows us that you have people that have great immune responses in populations like Quebec, as opposed to Manitoba, because we obviously didn't have the natural infection rate that Quebec had. So that data is not.
Are you saying then maybe there's more people who experienced an asymptomatic case or
Asymptomatic and symptomatic?
Right, but there's fewer in Manitoba then, so it's easier for it to find people without resistance.
That's just the point in reading these stats. They say simply that it is 3 times higher in death rate, but it's not a good comparison in terms of the data, because if you were to average that number, like you're saying, this is just a 1 week window of data. If you were to average the data from the last however many months this has been going on and look at that specific average number of deaths per 100,000, that per capita number, we would be able to have a better determination of what exactly is happening in each of these provinces in terms of their response and the actual immune capabilities of a population. This article we're reading, it's like they're just spitting out a fact that yes, for a brief window of time, we do have a higher per capita death rate. But are we just to sit here and assume that because Manitoba has bad healthcare, or because Manitobans aren't following these restrictions and we have to handicap people even more from having a life after these 2 years? What are we to assume from that? I think we need to do, as I was saying, and you were describing, we deep dive into what the data is particularly saying, and this is one window of time, a week, in which the province is looking worse than at least one other province, and worst in Canada for this particular window.
Yeah, I encourage people, when you're reading this, it's important to keep yourself informed and try to understand what's going on. But I encourage you, when you're reading it, just read carefully and think about what you're reading. And sometimes some of these news outlets are trying to steer you in a particular direction. And just remember that negative headlines are more grabby than positive ones. So just keep that in mind.
So the dog was just here visiting us and yelling at us, but that's okay.
Well, he had some thoughts on the restrictions. Oh, he's back to to back up his point, I think.
He wants us to talk about sheep, but that will be another day.
Yeah, Shiba coin.
So yeah, no, restrictions in this province. What are we to make of that? Are we to sit here and think we're not going to have a life for a little while? And should we just accept that? Like we will accept it because there's not going to be no out
choice.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, yeah, they make these rules, and allegedly they're going to enforce them. Generally, we should probably follow them, but I feel like many people just don't have patience for this anymore.
We're not. How many people are actually paying attention? Like I've been telling you, I think it's just the businesses that have to because they're receiving fines.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, there's obviously individuals that will sit at home and try to be as safe as possible, but most of us will want to socialize and have lives. I mean, it's been a couple of years, and people are postponing weddings and all the particular events that occur around your weddings. And really, we want to live life. Omicron is coming as a end of the pandemic, some say.
I was reading an article from with a headline from BC, from
Bonnie Tyler? What's her name?
Bonnie Henry.
Well, I'll sing some Bonnie Tyler later.
Yeah.
I might have been listening to that on YouTube before.
I'll make sure I'm gone for that.
I'm right behind you on that one.
She didn't make any firm claims one way or another, but there was some alluding to that perhaps this will bring about the end of this as a pandemic, and it will transition to an endemic situation, and we're all just going to have to move on.
Yeah. Well, I think.
What was that whole thing? Sorry to interrupt you. What was that whole thing about immunity? We talked about how eventually, at some point, no matter how many people have caught this, it's going to get to a certain population where they're going to end up not even necessarily needing a pandemic anymore because the immunities have been built up to it.
Yeah, it's basically a matter of what is the difference between a pandemic and an endemic situation, because all these viruses that we have right now are basically in an endemic state in which there is some kind of transmission pattern, and we just basically live and accept that rate and risk. And it's at a point where a large portion, at least of the Western countries or more developed countries, have created some good immune response through vaccination, and a lot of places also have had serious natural infections. And if this Omicron is bringing about transmission rates between vaccinated and non-vaccinated, it's going to get to a point where everyone's going to have been infected, or a huge population has been infected, and we're going to just have somewhat of a defense against more pandemics type of spread, because there's going to be a window of defense just strictly from the spread that's going to occur from this highly transmissible Omicron.
Right. Well, I mean, it's a pandemic because it comes along and it can travel through a large portion of the global population rapidly, and there's no immunity, or practically no immunity, to stand in its way. But as more and more immunity is created, whether through vaccination or through people becoming sick and recovering, it's not a pandemic anymore, because it's not. There's not the same risk that a large population will be affected all at once in a very severe way, or generally. And it does seem like Omicron is leading in that direction, and we're definitely going to learn more on that in the weeks to come.
Sounds good. So, go ahead, Michael. Did you
I was just saying, 2021 was like, obviously, as we know, it's the 31st right now. So, tomorrow's May 2022. And a lot of people were hoping that 2022 is going to be different than how we saw this year go. This year, we implemented all the vaccines. We saw a lot of recoveries. We saw it actually working. And now that this Omicron is here. So Omicron is leading us right into 2022, and a lot of people are just hoping that 2022 is going to end up being like a much better year than this year was. And honestly, it's kind of my hope too, because I thought we were going to go into our next year, sorry, just, ready to not necessarily go back to normal because we have a new normal now, but just to be able to, still see our family, see our friends, and not have to worry so much because we've all been, you know, our two shots or boosted or whatnot. And now it just seems like we took so many steps forward to just literally fall back. And I don't know, it's just my opinion on the
No,
whole
no,
thing.
I like your opinion, and it's basically where some people are. Like everyone, not everyone, but large portions of populations have been pro-vaccine, taking these vaccines in order to try to stop transmissions, is what a lot of people were doing. But we're realizing now with this new variant, it's like there'll be still some greater amount of transmission than there was how the vaccines were determined to be more preventative against the initial COVID-19 that came about. So with that being the case, yeah, it's like we're going back to the beginning of the pandemic, but this Omicron, as a lot of people are looking at it in a more positive way, because transmission rates are currently going up in South Africa, where it initiated, in the UK, which is a little behind, and now in the US and other Western countries. But what is going down is actually, for a lot of places, maybe not so much Manitoba at this last week, but the rates of death are going down as transmission is going up. So in a few weeks, will we see a window where more deaths are occurring, or are we seeing some evidence from that data to say, yes, more people are getting infected, but it's actually become less lethal to people?
I believe that's the direction we're going. We're going to see more infection, more widespread infection as we are, but we're going to see less severe illness and less death.
100%.
Well, on that note, I'd just like to say that's a positive outlook. I hope a lot of people will take the time to listen and be as cautious as possible, but also remember to live our lives and look positively on this virus, as we have enough information and precautionary measures that we should not worry, and we should not be divisive against other peoples who disagree with us, and just basically learn to live in harmony with each other as much as we have to live with this virus that is by no means being talked about as being able to be eradicated at this point in time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, take care of yourself, take care of others, understand that some people out there are scared. They've been being told to be scared for 2 years, so it's understandable. And, you just got to be patient with those people.
There are also people out there who are completely against everything and think it's all made up, and think that it's not, something that they need to do. And I just implore anybody that runs into somebody like that, because there are quite a few people out there that you'll see, whether it's stores, malls, walking on the street, your workplace, doesn't matter. They're not wearing a mask because they don't feel they need to. It's their right or whatnot. Let it be. It's not worth the argument.
Yeah, we don't need to have this animosity and conflict.
No, let it be. Everybody has their own beliefs. Everybody has their own opinions. It is what it is.
It's not worth it. People are vaccinated. You can take a lot of precaution and safety in these vaccines, and we're seeing that people with these are likely to have very mild cases, and that's a good thing, and we should allow every individual to make their choices. And with that said, I think, guys, let's look positively and keep updated and talk again on this very interesting subject that everybody likes to talk about these days.
Yeah,
I do agree.
We'll revisit it for sure.
Yeah. See what updates again probably in a few weeks and see what they say next.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to say goodbye. Goodbye, guys.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Goodbye. Rest in peace to John Madden, and rest in peace to Betty White.
Yes, Betty White. 100 years old, right?
She was 17 days being 100 years old.
Almost there.
Almost there. So close.
So close. Goodbye,
All right,
guys.
bye, guys.